My name is Stacy, and I am the Marketing and Communications Manager here at Commonwealth Learning Center and Stratford Foundation. We are joined this evening to talk about Summer Slide by two of our esteemed staff members, Beth Dinelli, who is the Director of Commonwealth Learning Center, and Kat Marsh, who is one of our lead educators at the center. Beth is a certified member of the Orton Gillingham Academy at the associate level, and she is trained and certified in various multisensory evidence-based approaches, such as Project READ, Visualizing and Verbalizing, and the Lind Mood Phoneme Sequencing Program. She has over 30 years of experience teaching students with dyslexia, ADHD, dysgraphia, and expressive and receptive language disorders. She is a diagnostic and prescriptive practitioner who enjoys meeting the individual needs of her students and observing their growth as readers and writers. She holds a master's degree in education from Fordham University. Kat Marsh has been a special educator for more than 20 years. She works with all grade levels as well as adult students in reading comprehension, writing, and math. Here at Commonwealth Learning Center, we do one-to-one education support services, tutoring services for kindergarten through adult learners in most all subject areas. We are currently enrolling for our summer session, and we do education evaluations in reading and math as well. I will turn it over to Beth to talk about how to put a stop to Summer Slide.
Thanks, Stacy. So welcome everybody tonight. We appreciate you joining us. So like Stacy said, our webinar tonight is Put a Stop to Summer Slide. So I'm going to be diving into the reading portion of the presentation, and Kat will dive into the math portion of the presentation. So just a little bit more information about me. So this is my 34th year of teaching. I've been with Commonwealth Learning Center for 27 years. And I've been teaching Orton Gillingham for 22. And as Stacy said, I'm certified at the associate level with the Orton Gillingham Academy. So I'm going to let Kat give you a little bit more information or background about herself.
So yes, hi everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. Yes, this is my 24th year of teaching. I started out when my own daughters, who are now in their 30s, needed special education. So I have a special education background. I got my master's in special ed in 2009. This is my 19th year at CLC, where I love working one-on-one with students. And I pursued a Ph.D. in education in 2022 from Lesley University in reading comprehension.
Great. Thanks, Kat. Okay. So our agenda tonight. So we're going to talk about what Summer Slide is. Then we'll talk about strategies for reading. Kat will talk about strategies for math. Then we'll talk about some resources, and then we can take questions. Okay, so what is Summer Slide? So over the summer, students experience regression in their skills, particularly in reading and math. They forget the skills that they learned during the academic school year. And basically, it's just a result of a lack of educational opportunities over the summer months. So this presentation is going to underscore the importance of weaving in some academics into your child's summer plan. Okay, so here are some Summer Slide statistics. 84% of students between 5th and 6th grades demonstrate Summer Slide in math. Students may lose up to 2 months of reading proficiency. More than 2/3 of the reading achievement gap in 9th grade can be traced back to cumulative summer learning loss in the elementary years. And by the time students reach 5th grade, those affected by summer learning loss can lag behind their peers by 2.5 to 3 years. All right, so in 2020, a study was done that was published in the American Educational Research Association Journal. And it found that students in grades 1 through 8 lose 17 to 34% of a prior year's learning over summer break. And it also indicated that kids who fall behind one summer are likely to widen that gap even more as time goes on. Okay, so who is most affected by the Summer Slide? So all students experience some type of regression, but there are certain populations of students who are more vulnerable. So there are the early learners. So in the elementary years, those are years that are key for potential learning loss because these students learn vital basic foundational skills in reading and math. And then there's those children with learning disabilities who really are at risk because they're without the instructional supports they receive throughout the school year. And then low-income families, because these families often don't have the same time and resources to devote to kids outside of school, especially in the summer. Okay, so some key ideas to keep in mind. So 9 out of 10 teachers spend at least 3 to 6 weeks reteaching skills at the start of the school year because of summer slide. So over the summer, when you're working with your child, you want to keep the learning interactive and enjoyable to maintain your child's interest and their progress. And then you want to spend 20 to 30 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week on supported educational activities. I would lean more towards the 20 minutes, but if you feel that your child can do 30 minutes of some academics, then definitely go for it. My recommendation, though, would be 20. I think that's sufficient. Okay, so first I'm going to discuss some strategies to reinforce pre-reading skills. So these are for kiddos that are going into kindergarten or who struggled in kindergarten and are going into first grade. Okay, so phonological awareness activities. So what is phonological awareness? So that's a basic foundational skill that all students need to become successful readers and spellers. So some skills that fall under that umbrella of phonological awareness are rhyming, blending and segmenting sounds, manipulating sounds, and sequencing sounds. And all of these activities are auditory. It does not involve reading. So the first activity I have up here, rhyme time, has to do with rhyming. So you might say to your child, I'm thinking of an animal that rhymes with big. So the answer could be pig. And then you might say to them, what else rhymes with big? And if they say a nonsense word, it's okay as long as it rhymes with the given word, because that means that they understand the concept of rhyming. The next activity is called clap it out. So for this activity, you would give your child a 1, 2, or 3 syllable word and have them clap out the syllables. So a word like hat, 1 clap, 1 syllable. Apple, 2 claps for 2 syllables. Banana, 3 claps for 3 syllables. Then the next activity is called I spy for first sounds in a word. So you might say something like, I spy something green that starts with G. And the answer might be grasshopper. So this activity can really be done anywhere. It can be done at home. You could be on a walk. You could be driving in the car, or it could be done at the grocery store. And obviously you want to emphasize the first sound of a word. That's definitely the easiest sound for them to identify. So I would definitely start there. The next activity is called sound scavenger hunt. So you might say to your child, can you find something in our house that starts with the P sound? Some examples of that might be a picture, pencil, pear, another. So you could also say, can you find anything in our house that starts with the B sound? They might find a book or a bag. So you can do it with any sound. And then lastly, the last activity is called Guess My Word. So for this activity, you're focusing on blending sounds, which is a real key skill for reading. So you want to say the individual sounds in a 3 or 4 sound word, pausing between each sound. So for example, you might say k, a, t, and then have your child blend the sounds together to guess the word. And in this case, it would be cat. You could say a 4 sound word like brim, and then say each individual sound, b, I, and they would have to blend those sounds together to say brim. There's tons of activities out there on phonological awareness. One resource that I really like is by Newhouse Education Center, and it's reading readiness skills, and that's a really great resource. So I wanted to put that out there. We're going to talk about other resources toward the end of the presentation, but that's a good one for phonological awareness. Okay, now I want to talk about some letter and sound recognition activities. And again, this is geared towards your kindergartners entering kindergarten or going into first grade, possibly second if they're really struggling. And I want to point out that the activities that Kat and I are going to discuss tonight are just a sampling. There's so many activities out there. We really hand selected what we felt were the best ones, but it was really hard to narrow it down. So this is just a sampling. Okay, so the first activity is tactile letters. So for this, you're practicing upper and lowercase letters. So you want to either write or print out upper and lowercase letters on some index cards. And then you want to spread glue in the shape of the letters. And then you want to sprinkle colored sand on the glue. And then what you're going to do is you're going to have your child feel and trace the letter as they say the name or sound of the letter. So this is what we call a very multi-sensory activity. So that means it's tapping into the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic modalities of learning. So by presenting the letters and sounds in this manner, the students are going to remember them better because it's going to go into their long-term memory. So that's really key. Something else you can do with these tactile letters is have them match upper and lowercase letters, or have them spell or you can have them spell their name. And then to piggyback onto that, you could also do this with Play-Doh. So again, print out some letter cards, both upper and lowercase letters, have your child create the letter in Play-Doh and have them trace the letter, saying the letter name and sound. Again, it's a very tactile, multi-sensory activity. Okay, another activity is called the letter hunt. So you give your child a basket with some letters, and I would put about 10 letters in the basket. And then the manipulatives can either be foam letters, magnetic letters, or letter tiles. And then you want to call out a letter from a shuffled letter card deck. And your child looks for the letter to see if they have it. And if they have it, they say the name of the letter or the sound of the letter, and they put it back in the basket. So these are really simple, basic activities with that aren't very complicated and really with minimal materials. So they should be easy to use at home. Okay, another activity for sorting letters. You can use a craft box and put some letter stickers on each compartment, either upper and lowercase or both. And then your child sorts letter manipulatives into the correct sections of the box, again, reinforcing the letter name and the letter sound. Okay, a couple of other letter activities. So there's something called the alphabet scavenger hunt. So you want to write individual letters on pieces of paper and scatter the papers on the floor. And then have your child find items around the house that begin with each letter and place them on the corresponding paper. I suggest starting out with just 5 letters. You don't want to overwhelm them. And then you can increase the number of letters as you play. Another thing you can do is use a timer for that, so that it gives them a little bit more of a challenge. Another activity is the beach ball alphabet game. So for that, you need a blown up beach ball and a Sharpie. And what you want to do is you want to scatter the alphabet, write the alphabet all over the beach ball. Then you want to toss the beach ball to your child. And then you're going to ask them to name the letter maybe closest to their thumb or closest to their pinky. If they know their left from their right, you can say, what's the letter closest to your right thumb? What's the letter closest to your left pinky? Then if you want to make it more challenging, you can add a finger each time you toss the ball to make it a little more challenging. Then there's alphabet soup. So for that activity, you need foam letters. You need either a kitchen pot or a large bowl, and you need a measuring cup. And so what you want to do is you want to put some foam letters in a bowl, have your child stir up the alphabet soup with a spatula or with the measuring cup. Then they're going to scoop out some letters with the measuring cup, have them take the letters out of the measuring cup and name the letter and sound of the letter they picked. And then lastly, you can have them write letters in slime, sand, or shaving cream. And that is a very tactile, multi-sensory activity, again, going into that long-term memory so they can recall those letter names and sounds. Okay, so now we're going to dive into some word reading activities. And the first group of word reading activities I'm going to talk about are some card games. But for all of these activities, to decide what words to use, you're going to either ask your child's teacher about what phonics skills they're working on. If your child is an older child in the 4th or 5th grade, you can pick words from a book they're reading, or they can be sight words that they need to work on. And again, your child's teacher is the best resource for that. I'm also going to suggest a book that can give you lists of words based on phonics skills, and that'll be in the resource page towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so the first card game is called Gotcha, and this is a really popular game here at the center. The students love it. It's really quick, but it gives them a good hit of word reading, reading words in isolation. So what you want to do is you want to create a deck of 15 to 20 cards, and then you're going to write words on 10 to 13 of them, and then on the rest of the cards, you're going to write Gotcha. Then you're going to place the rest of the deck face down in the middle of the table. And then you're going to take turns drawing a card, and you're going to read the words on the card. You'll read a word, your child will read a word, you're going to take turns. And when a player gets a gotcha card, they get to take the other player's cards. So kids get really excited about that. They love the anticipation of seeing if they're going to get a gotcha card. And the player with the most cards at the end of the game wins. So it's a really simplistic game, but they really enjoy it. Okay, another card game that you can use words for is memory. So you would select 5 to 10 words, either based on a phonics skill that they're working on at school, or a sight word, or from a book they're reading. And what you want to do is you want to write words on separate index cards, use 3 by 5. You want to make pairs for each word. So if you have 5 words, you're going to have 10 cards. And what you're going to do is you're going to place the cards face down on the table. And when it's your turn, you're going to turn 2 cards over, see if they match. If they match, you're going to read each word, and then you're going to keep them if they match. And if they match, then you can take another turn. The player with the most matches wins. A variation of this could be to do rhyming pairs. So if you see up here, dark and park, those are rhyming pairs. You could also use words like sail and pail, vowel teams, or cape and tape, which are silent E words. So that's just a variation. Okay, then there's Go Fish. So again, you want to select 10 to 20 words for this game. And when you're creating the cards for this game, you want to write the words on hold the card vertically and write the words across the top. That makes the cards easier for your child to hold during the game. So that's really important. Then you want to shuffle and deal 3 to 5 cards to each player, and place the rest of the cards or the rest of the deck face down. And then players take turns asking each other for a word that matches one in their hand. So for example, if I had the word rust in my hand, I would say, I have rust. Do you have rust? Or if your child has the word cape in their hand, they might say, I have cape. Do you have cape? So if the opponent has a matching card, they give it over to the player. And if the first player can go again. If they don't, they say Go Fish, and the player draws a card from the remaining deck. So each time a player has a match, they read the words and place the pair face up, and the person with the most pairs wins at the end of the game. Okay, and then Old Maid is another good one to use for word reading. For this one, you're going to select 4 to 5 words, and then you're going to, again, when you're creating your index cards, you want to hold the cards vertically and write the word across the top so it's easier for them to hold the cards. Then you're going to choose one more word without a match, and that's going to be the winning card. So you want to shuffle and deal the cards, and then players take turns drawing a card from the other player's hand. If a player draws a card that matches, he or she reads the 2 matching words to keep the pair. Play continues until all the cards are matched, and the player who has the odd card at the end wins. So again, these are really simplistic. You don't want it to be complicated, and you don't want them to get frustrated with lots of rules. So these are pretty straightforward. Okay, so some ideas for variations for the card game. So I mentioned rhyming words. For, I would say, your 4th and 5th graders, you could do matching synonyms or matching antonyms. For your littler students, your little kiddos, you could match upper and lowercase letters. And then if your child is working on syllable types, you can match syllable types, closed syllable to closed syllable, bossy R to bossy R, things like that. Okay, so the next activity is called swatting words. This is another activity we do a lot at the center. You just need index cards or Post-it notes and then a fly swatter. And you're going to arrange 5 to 10 words on the table, wall, or floor. And then you're going to say a word and have your child find the word and swat it with a fly swatter. And then you have your child say the word as they swat it. We also use this game at the center if a child is struggling discriminating between sounds like vowel sounds. So for example, if a child is struggling with short I and short E, we write an I and an E on the whiteboard, and then we say words with short I and short E. So they have to listen for that vowel sound. So if I said the word bin, they would have to swat the I and say I because bin has the I sound. Another variation could be to let your child take a turn dictating the words while you swat the words. So this one is, again, quick and easy, and they really enjoy this game a lot. Okay, so this one's called Boxing Words. So for this game, you need this template, which I could definitely email to people. It's very simple. And you want a pocket protector or a sheet protector. That way you can reuse the game. And you want 2 dry erase markers that are 2 different colors. And so what you want to do when you play this game is when it's your turn, you draw a line between vertically or horizontally. So if you draw a line vertically, you're going to read the word to the left and to the right. Theme, cute. If you draw a line horizontally, you want to read the word above and below the line. Cute tape. Then if you take a turn and get to close the box, then you get to color in your square, and that's your square. So the way to win is the person with the most boxes with their color at the end wins the game. And this is another simple game, another game that the kids really enjoy. And just also note on this particular game board, I used words that have a silent E. Okay, another game that we use at the center a lot is Roll, Read, and Cover. This is a variation on Connect 4. There's tons of free Roll, Read, and Cover templates on the University of Florida Literacy Institute website, and that's free, and I highly recommend taking advantage of those. So for this particular template, there's just 3 rows. Typically, there are 4, and the words that are on this particular board are 1 syllable, and they're bossy R words. So if it were my turn, I would roll a die, and then if I landed, say, on a 3, I would go to the 3 column and I'd pick a word to read. So say I read stork, then I would color, and again, use a page or sheet protector because you can reuse it. And you want to use a dry erase marker and color that square. So the person who gets, in this case, 3 across, 3 vertically, or 3 diagonally first wins the game. Okay, and a couple of other ideas. You could go to myfreebingocards.com and create bingo cards with different words that you want your child to practice. You could go online and get a free tic-tac-toe template. And then lastly, a great game that I actually still play with my niece and nephew. I started playing that with them when they were in elementary school. Now they're in high school and college, and they still love playing this game. I would recommend it for your proficient readers or 4th and 5th grade. It's a timed game, so it times you for a minute, and you create as many words as you can in 3 minutes. And to create the words, the cubes need to connect. So if you look at the cover of the game here, GATE connects, so you create the word gate. You can't skip over cubes. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend it, and you can find it on Amazon. It's not very expensive at all. Okay, and lastly, for word reading, something that's free is a website called Wheel of Names. Okay, and so this is a nice little gimmick that kids love, really simple. Again, a simple idea, but they enjoy it. So you can go to the site and create a wheel with words. After you create the wheel, your child clicks on the wheel and it spins and lands on a wheel. Lands on a word. And your child's going to read the word. After they read the word, they're going to click the word and it's going to be removed from the wheel. So you want to use the wheel until all the words are removed. And you can control how many words you add to the wheel. And I highly recommend this website, and it's free. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about considerations for selecting a summer reading book, which for some people can be daunting. So I wanted to kind of break it down a little bit. So the first thing you want to do is start with your child's interests. So you want to think about what kind of things do they like? Do they like sports, science, animals? Do they prefer stories that are funny or realistic or adventurous? Do they like a series like Harry Potter or The Magic Treehouse? Or do they like a standalone book? Would they rather read about kids their age or something totally imaginative? So these are all kinds of things you want to think about and ask your child about so you can kind of narrow it down because you want it to be something they enjoy reading about. So then after you think about their interests, think about the format. Is it just going to be a print book? Is it going to be an audiobook, an ebook, a graphic novel, nonfiction, comic strips, a short chapter book, a magazine article? And for kids who are, your primary readers in kindergarten, first and second grade, they might just be reading control text. So texts that are phonetic with just phonetic skills. I would recommend for that, I would recommend Primary Phonics. They have tons of great phonics readers, or something called Spire. Those are great. Okay, so then if you're not sure what your child's reading level is, or you're not sure if the book is appropriate for them, for their reading level, you can use the 5-finger rule. So what you're going to do is you're going to have your child read 1 page aloud, and then if they commit 0 to 1 errors, it's too easy. If they make 2 to 3 errors, it's just right. If they make 4 to 5 errors, it's probably challenging. And if it's more than 5 errors, it's definitely too hard for independent reading. So this is a good guideline. I actually use this at the center as well. And I know some of the other teachers use it and they find it really useful. I'm going to talk in a little bit about something else you can use, which is called a lexile. Okay, so after you've selected the book, you want to set goals. That's really important. You want to give your child a purpose for reading. So I recommend that students read 15 to 20 minutes daily. That's the basic minimum. Then after that, a goal might be, read 15 days in a row. That would be for, I would say, a 3rd grader or above, or a proficient reader. If your child is on an IEP and struggling, that's not going to be your goal. You might finish 1 chapter book, during the summer, or you might try 3 new genres, or they might try to read through 3 or 4 books over the summer. So whatever the goal is, you want to celebrate it with something simple, which could be extra park time. It could be, you get to choose a restaurant that we go to dinner for, or they can get a new bookmark. Something simple, but something rewarding. And then when you're reading with your child, you want to keep it positive and achievable. So you definitely want to avoid turning reading into a punishment. You want it to be something that they enjoy. So you want to avoid correcting every mistake, and you definitely want to praise their effort. So if they sound out words, you want to praise that and say something like, I really like how you used your strategies to sound out that word. You want to really reinforce that. You don't want to reinforce guessing. You want to break that habit if that's something that they're doing. Confidence is definitely more important than perfection when you're reading over the summer. Another thing you could say to them, let's read until the timer goes off. If you want to use a timer, that's something you can do. You can say, let's read, and then talk about the funniest part of the book, the scariest part of the book. And then if there's frustration that arises, then switch to reading together or switch to reading aloud to your child. You definitely don't want them to feel frustrated. And you know your child best. So if 20 minutes is too much on a certain day, you can definitely cut it in half. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so reading aloud and together. So you want to take turns reading pages to avoid fatigue. You can do echo reading, where you read a sentence and they repeat it. And it's important to keep in mind that reading aloud builds a lot of skills. So it builds the vocabulary, it increases their listening comprehension. And when you're reading aloud to your child, you're modeling fluent reading. That's what you want to do. You want them to hear how a fluent reader sounds. That's gonna promote their fluency. And then it also encourages discussion and comprehension. Something else I encourage parents to do is to attend story times and themed events at a library. And then I definitely encourage parents to have their child get a library card. You really want to get them invested in reading. Okay, so then at home, you want to make a really reading-friendly environment and make it social. So you want to keep books visible and accessible. You want to create a nice, cozy space for them to read. You might might find a corner with put some blankets and pillows. You want to reduce background noise and distractions when they're reading. That's very important so that they can focus. Summer is definitely the perfect time for them to read outside. You could have a family reading time where there's a designated time where everyone in the family sits down and reads. And then you can have parent and child book discussions and discuss a book that you're reading or that the child is reading. I think that's a great opportunity to really have some good discussions. Okay, and a couple of other examples for other reading opportunities. You could have them read a recipe, or you can read a recipe together and then cook together. Reading instructions for a game, reading signs on a road trip, or just reading about a topic your child is interested in. I think all of those are valid reading opportunities. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Lexile. I'm not going to dive too deep into this because that could be a whole other presentation. But some of you probably have seen the word Lexile or Lexile measure. So first of all, a Lexile evaluates two main factors: a text complexity, so how challenging a text is based on its vocabulary and sentence structure, and then reader's ability, how well a child can understand that text. So a little bit of background about Lexiles. So they were developed by Metametrics in 1989, using research from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. And then in 1998, Lexile measures started becoming more widely used in education and in publishing. So typically you'll see a Lexile measure or score on standardized reading tests like MAP testing or STAR testing. That's where you'll see a Lexile level. So a book's Lexile level is determined by word frequency, so common versus rare words, sentence length, and overall complexity. And a rule of thumb, and I'm just going to go to the next slide. So if you know your child's Lexile level, and don't be alarmed if you don't, but if you do, then a rule of thumb is to choose a book that's either 100 Lexiles below or 50 Lexiles above their Lexile level. So for example, if their Lexile level is 500, you could go to either 550 or go to 400. So that's a rule of thumb. And where to find Lexile levels for books, there's a free search tool from Metametrics where you can put in your child's Lexile level and then put in some filters like their age, their grade, and their interests, and it'll populate and give you some suggestions for books at their Lexile level. And then on the other flip side, you can put in a book's title and it'll tell you what the Lexile level is, and then you can see if it falls in the range of your child's Lexile measure. But again, don't be alarmed if you don't know the Lexile level. But I wanted to touch upon this a little bit because some of you most likely have seen that if your child has had standardized testing at school. Other places you can find Lexile measures on Amazon. Typically, if you're looking at a book's description, they typically have the Lexile measure in that information. You could also go to Scholastic Book Wizard, and then another site called Goodreads. And this particular slide gives you the average Lexile ranges by grade. So that's just for your information. And again, I'm not going to go any further into it just because, like I said, it could be a whole other presentation. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch upon is strategies to reinforce reading comprehension. So when you're helping your child at home with reading comprehension, there's things you can do before reading, during reading, and after reading. So before reading, you want to preview what they're going to read. You want to preview the book, and you can do that by looking at the title, the cover, and the illustrations, reading the back cover. And then if it's a chapter book, flipping through the chapter titles. Then you want to discuss with your child what they think the book is going to be about. And you also want to activate their background knowledge and see how much they know about the topic of the book. That's really important. You want to really preview that for them. Then you want to make connections. So you want to connect the topic to their life. So you might say to them, have you ever felt nervous like the character might? Or you could also say, what do you already know about outer space if the book is about outer space? Then again, you want to set a purpose. So you might say, let's read to find out why the character made that choice. Or you could say, pay attention to how the problem gets solved. Those are just some examples. Okay, then during reading, you want to strengthen their thinking skills. So you definitely want to avoid yes and no questions. You want to pause and ask open-ended questions. So you might say, why do you think that happened? Or how do you think the character feels right now? And you might also say, what might happen next? Kids love to make predictions. That's a great active reading strategy to have them make a prediction. And it gives them a purpose and a motivation to read. So that's really important. And these particular skills that I'm talking about are what we call active reading strategies. You want to get your child engaged with the text because research tells us if they're engaged with the text, they're going to remember it better and they're going to understand it better. Another thing you want to do is practice think alouds with them. You want to model that for them and model that you can be thinking about the text as you're reading it. So something you might say is, that part confused me. I'm going to reread it. Or you might say, this reminds me of another book we read. You also want to clarify vocabulary. So you want to stop at unfamiliar words, maybe help them with figuring out the word by looking at context clues, or you can look up definitions together. And then lastly, another really valuable strategy is visualizing. This is another strategy where research tells us if students are picturing in their mind what they read, they're going to remember it and understand it better and be able to answer what we call higher order thinking questions like main idea, inference, drawing conclusions. So things you might ask are, what does this scene look like in your mind? Or if this were a movie, what would you see? You definitely want to promote that. Then lastly, after reading, you want to deepen their understanding. So you might want to say to them, who are the main characters or what was the main problem and how was it solved? This is definitely an opportunity to also discuss theme and lesson. So you might ask them what the message was the author was trying to send, or ask them what the character learned in the story. And then another active reading strategy is making connections. So you want them to make connections to the text. So there's text to self connections. So you might start by saying, this reminds me of a vacation we took to Cape Cod. Or text to text connections, where you might say, this looks like another book we read last summer. Or text to world connections. And you could say something like, this is similar to something happening in our town or at our school. So again, you really want to deepen their understanding after they read. And then lastly, you want to make it engaging. So some other ways to do that are to act out scenes from the story, create alternate endings, and you want to keep discussion short and positive. So I hope these give you some really good ideas to use with your child at home over the summer. And I'm going to turn it over to Kat, who's going to dive into math.
So I'm going to talk about some strategies to boost math skills. And let's see, we'd like to start out by kind of imagining what many parents may think practice looks like over the summertime with these workbooks and packets that school might send home. These are all fine. There's nothing wrong with these at all. Some children actually like them, but for some, it can feel like a continuation of school. So hopefully we're going to look at a couple of ways that you can kind of get around that, or at least blend that in with other things. One thing you might want to consider is a kind of a creative approach. If your child has any sort of creative bones in their body, they might want to use math to build something, or they might want to cook, or they might want to create something where they can show you some of their math skills. That's one approach. Another option is to, think about what your child is interested in and use that to sort of, as one psychologist said, get math in there. With whatever they're interested in, you can always find a way to add math to it, whether they're into art, or maybe they're interested in geography or building things or whatever. There's always a way to look for the math inside those things. Okay, so I'm going to split this up into a couple of things. One is going to focus on math concepts. These are kind of the underlying ideas and skills in math and what you can do to boost them. The other is going to be mostly games. So what you're going to see here is probably pretty close to nothing what school looks like to you or your children, but bear with me, because I think you will find that some of these concepts and ideas are really the basis for what your kids need to be doing to prevent that summer slide from happening. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is something called subitizing. You may not know that word. You don't need to know that word. But it's the ability to look at something, a group of something, and know how many without counting one by one. So we often find that even very young students, even 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, can instantly recognize 2 and 4 and 5 and things like that, without having to count one each time. That's a good concept to sort of reinforce. You can do that in a number of different ways. There's a circle here where it's got all the dots laid out in patterns and so forth. When it gets above 5 or 6, then most people shift to some kind of a strategy. So you can see the birds in the ocean there. There's a group of 4 off to one side, and there's a group of 3 turned a different way. So 4 plus 3 is 7. The other group of birds down below there, you can see they're set up in rows and columns of 3. So 3, 6, 9, or even 3 times 3. So look for patterns like that, and maybe you'll find them a lot of times in dice and so forth. You can have your child practice subitizing, counting with knowing how many objects are there without actually counting. Okay. Another concept that needs some reinforcing in some cases is the linkage between like the amount of 3, the numeral 3, and the word 3. So sometimes kids see the number and they don't connect it with exactly how many that is. Now, 3 is a simple example, but sometimes children see the number 26 and they hear the word 26. They might see a 2 and a 6, but they don't really understand what that is. So there are ways you can practice connecting those 3 things. Another concept you want to pay attention to is patterns of, well, particularly 10, because our number system is based on 10. So patterns of 10, so friends of 10 is what they're often called. At the center, we use multisensory math, and they call them friends of 10. They're just pairs that make up 10. And this is another concept that you want to try to reinforce in any way you can. Let's see, what's next? Whoop, I skipped one. Aside from 10, you might want to consider doing anything that helps your child see patterns that make up a target, like 6 and 6 make 12, 3 and 3 make 6, 5 and 5 make 10, 6, 7 and 7 make 14, and things like that. So anytime you have a number pattern that you want to focus on, you can reinforce the concept of seeing those patterns made up by their components. In multisensory math, this is kind of called packing and unpacking the number. So the number 12 can unpack in a number of different ways with a number of different patterns. Let's see what we have next. Okay. Most of us have one or more of these little fidget things at home. Perhaps you've had them for a while and they've been sort of tossed aside. I encourage you to take them out again and kind of see them in a different way. I kind of call them pattern machines. And you can take one and you can set up some kind of a pattern. Maybe you want to encourage your child to count by 2 or count by 3, or recognize what a pattern goes back and forth. Maybe 2 of them are punched in and 3 are up, and then the next 2 are down and the next 3 are up. These kinds of simple patterns really help build your child's mental number line, which is an underlying basis for understanding all kinds of math. And it's a kind of a simple thing. I mean, you can hand one of these to your child and see if they can find the pattern that you made, or you can hand them one and say, make a pattern and I'll see if I can figure it out. And it doesn't matter what the pattern is or what size the fidget toy is there. You can use any kind of any size and any shape and just try to make random patterns and see if they can follow those. Another one that this is actually a landmark type of multisensory approach to multiplication. What you're using here is a sort of a visual. So you're multiplying by pairs, and the first there you've got pairs of sneakers there, right? 2 pairs of sneakers are 4 sneakers altogether. Then you've got a tricycle here, 3 tires on the tricycle, 3 times 2 is 6. And you've got a table, each table has 4 legs, 4 times 2 is 8. So you're using a visual to sort of help support those patterns. Another underlying concept is flashcards or fact cards. Many of us also have stacks of these at home. Children often get, bored or turned off by just using the flashcards in the sort of standard way that I think the manufacturers intend you to hold up a card and the child tells you the answer, and hold up the next card, the child tells you the answer. But that feels a lot like being tested all the time. It can make students sometimes very anxious. Instead, I might suggest that you spread them all out and sort them, and maybe ask your child, can you find any that start with a 3? Let's put those all together. What do those look like? Can you find any that always are subtracting a 2, and put those all together and look at those patterns? So you're looking at the whole set of cards together and asking your child to sort of like group them together and maybe talk about what they're seeing as far as patterns, rather than just kind of testing themselves constantly. Okay, another way to use those cards, if you have a set of cards that have the answer on one side and the fact on the other side, again, set those out, all at once. This is landmark in Beverly, Massachusetts, is another pattern recognition. You're seeing the whole thing. You're seeing the answer, pardon me, and you're seeing the fact at the same time. And you're asking your child to sort of match those and see those together, rather than just seeing a part. Like if they're always seeing 7 times 2 and having to come up with 14 out of the top of their head, this time they're seeing one card that says 7 times 2 and another card that says the 14. And sometimes it's easier for them to see that connection. They're not always seeing the part, either the fact or the answer. They're seeing them both together. And landmark people have done a lot of research to show that really helps reinforce some of these facts. It's not just multiplication, it's addition, subtraction, division, and so forth. Another option, and this can be kind of open-ended. If you have a fact card, pull one card out of the deck, and then give your child the rest of the deck and say, match me. But don't tell them what it is you're looking for. Like in this case, if I pulled out this card, 6 minus 4, obviously to me that's 2. I might be expecting them to pull out another card that's equal to 2, right? 2 minus 0, for example. But they might pull out another card that starts with a 6. And so then we can talk about that. Oh, my card starts with a 6. Your card starts with a 6. Let's see where we end up. So this can kind of inform you a little bit about their understanding of what the numbers are and what they mean to them, without sort of like making them anxious about, again, finding the answer all the time. Okay. Another good underlying concept that doesn't probably get enough attention is comparing things. So here are some examples. We've got manipulatives here on the extreme left-hand side, where we're just comparing how many little, what are those, bears or something we have. And the one in the middle, we're comparing a number of dots. The dots are different colors. And then the far one would be maybe for older students, where you've got the actual numerals and you're asking them to use the greater than, less than, or equal sign. So this is another activity that can kind of give you some sense of understanding where your child is at and what they're actually understanding. Do they understand a 2-digit number is bigger than a single-digit number, and so forth? Okay. And ordering, okay, so ordering from smallest to largest and largest to smallest, just visually seeing how many of an item or how many dots are in one square compared to another square. And then you can also switch over to doing having actual numerals where they're sorting them. Helps to build up their mental number line and helps you kind of understand where they're at. Tally marks is another interesting concept that's, I think, overlooked a bit or pushed aside in school and not used. At the center, I tend to find a lot of kids who are in upper elementary school who've forgotten about tally marks. So I often use them to keep score in a game. And it can really help students kind of see and reinforce again, grouping things, especially grouping things by fives and seeing that, 2 groups of 5 is 10, counting, by saying 5 and then not saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but seeing that pattern of 5 and not counting one by one each time they see that. This can really help to reinforce their underlying concept of how our number system is put together. And another kind of forgotten skill here, underlying concept, is just counting. I often find students who are struggling with math in 5th and 6th grade even are not good at skip counting. They can't count by 2s. They can't count by 3s, or at least not very far by 3s. And so to me, they haven't really caught on to the pattern that is underlying these things. All 2s are even numbers, 3s are sometimes even and sometimes not. But I sometimes have them skip count, maybe, up to 50 or so. You don't have to go crazy with it. And also consider having them count forwards on the number line and backwards. It's interesting to note that counting backwards is a little more challenging, but it also really helps them to develop their ability to add by going forward and subtract by going backward. And skip counting also reinforces multiplication, and that, of course, reinforces division facts and so forth. Place value is another area that sometimes kids struggle with. You can use popsicle sticks or anything that's handy, have them collect sticks from outside or little twigs and so forth, and group them together, bundle 10 together with an elastic band so they can see how they could make groups of 10 and so forth. You can ask them to, once they have a bundle together, ask them to show me what 56 looks like, and see how many bundles of 10 they use, how many ones, and how they arrange them and so forth. And then you can ask them, okay, if that's 56, what's 66? And see if they add another group of 10 or if they add a 1. Then you can kind of see where they may have a little bit of a misconception about adding 10 or subtracting 10, adding 5 or subtracting 5, and so forth. Okay, for older kids, I find that sometimes a good support when they're doing something that seems like a multi-step procedure, sometimes it can help them if they have something written out in words, and beside that also have the numbers and what the numbers are supposed to be doing. So this would be for older kids, maybe 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. This is another landmark technique. These are called flappers. They're just index cards. And usually there's a name at the bottom. You can see this one, this yellow one at the top is called Finding GCF. GCF is greatest common factor. And then on one side, I've kind of split the card down the middle. And on one side, I have the step-by-step words. And then on the right-hand side, I have the numbers and what's happening to the numbers and what the result is. Many times I will ask the student to tell me what they think the words should say, because sometimes if you just hand them a procedure, a step-by-step procedure, even if it's brilliantly written out, it's not in their own words, it's not in their own terms, then I think they find it a little harder to, adapt themselves to to the way of stepping through the procedure if it's not kind of in their own words. Sometimes kids have trouble writing these out, so I write them out for them, but I do ask them to sort of describe in their own words. What do I do first? Okay, step one. Okay, what do I do for step two? And so forth. Okay. All right. So those are some concepts and some ideas for shoring up some concepts. Next, we're going to go into some math games. Games are a good way to promote skills and have some fun at the same time. Games often, kind of erase that whole anxiety about not being good at math. Many kids just assume that they're not good at math because they're not good, they're not fast, they don't remember everything that they're supposed to remember. They miss a step or they make a mistake and they don't get the right answer. So math games kind of bring them back into an area where they can just kind of either let loose and relax or sometimes be quite competitive, which is not a bad thing, actually. If they're competitive, they're usually paying a little bit more attention. Okay, so these are some of my top math games. One very simple one is trash can math. So you can use a spinner or a dice or something, and you roll the dice, and one at a time you fill in the numbers. This one on the left-hand side here has just got tens. T is tens, 0, O is ones. You have to place your number. So let's say I rolled a 2. I might not want to put that in the tens because my goal is to try to make the biggest number I can. So I want to put my smaller number in the ones place and my bigger number in the tens place if I can. You could also change that around and challenge them to make the smallest number they can after 2 or 3 rolls. You can also make several more rolls and then have them add the number together. That can also be fun. You can have them subtract the number. That's a little trickier because you have to make sure they put a bigger number at the top. War. Okay, this is a hugely popular game. It's very simple. You just take an ordinary deck of cards. Oftentimes I will take out what they call the face cards, the king, the queen, and the jack, just so I have just numbers. Divide up the deck in half, and each player turns over a card. Whoever has the higher card wins. If you both turn up the same number, like in this example, both have turned up a 6, then you put 3 cards face down and then a 4th card face up, and whoever has the top card of the one face up wins the whole jackpot there. This is a very popular game. It's very fast. Sometimes I ask the students to go faster, because I want them to supertize. Remember that word? I want them to quickly see that 7 is bigger than 2. I don't want them to count. So sometimes we get a little sloppy and the cards end up on the floor, but that's fun too. It's a very fun game. I actually play it with high school students, believe it or not, just maybe for the last 5 minutes of the session. It's very fun. This is another popular game called Crossout Singles. In this game, you probably would roll a dice, a number cube. Usually we try to stick to a small one, so one that goes 1 through 6 is sufficient. You roll the dice, you allow the student to fill in the rolled numbers anywhere in these 9 squares. When the squares are all filled in, you then have them add the rows, the blue rows here, go into the circles on the side. The green columns here go into the circles on the bottom, and the purple diagonal goes into the one in the corner. And then any of the numbers in the circles that only appear once get cross out singles. And then you add up the remaining numbers, and whoever has the higher score wins. So this is a good practice for mental addition, for also seeing patterns. There's 3 and 4, that makes 7, and 2 more makes 9, and so forth. And you can get them, you usually get a lot of repeated answers, so you can see them finding patterns of 11, patterns of 9 all over the place. Okay, Make a 10 is another fairly popular game. This is, again, reinforces the idea of what can you do to make 10, and our number system is based on 10, so this becomes really important. You have 5 dice, you roll the dice all at once. If you can put together 2 dice that make 10, 6 and 4, for example, you get 1 point. If you can make 10 with 3 dice, you get 5 points. If you use 4 dice to make 10, you get 10 points. And if you use all 5 dice, you get 50 points. Kids like to do this, and you can keep score with those tally marks, which is nice because everything is 1, 5, 10, or 50. So tally marks is a good way to reinforce that as well. Let's see, what's next? Okay, Bubblegum Bump. This is another really popular one. I think because kids tend to enjoy seeing whether they can bump you off the number that you ended up on. So that's kind of fun. So you roll 3 dice, you add them together, you cover that number. You can use pieces of paper, colored paper, or if you have chips or markers in different colors. If the number is already covered, you can bump that person, hence the name Bubblegum Bump. If you land on the number twice, you can put a double on it, and once you double cover it, it's locked and the other person can't bump you. So that's kind of fun too. Okay, let's see. This is another popular game, Race to 50, or you could go backwards and race by subtraction down to 0. You start at 1, you roll the dice, you add whatever the dice are, move along the board, and if you have your child keep track, not by tally marks, but by actual using the adding algorithm, that gives them extra practice. It's especially handy when you're starting at 50 and racing down to 0, because there's a lot of mental math that can happen there. Or you could have them, using the standard subtraction algorithm where they might have to regroup to make their way down to 0. That's another popular one. Tic-tac-toe addition. This is another popular game. Here you have a set of numbers at the bottom, and I typically use a paper clip. We'll use 2 paper clips, and the first player gets to place both paper clips, and they add those numbers together, and then they can cover that square. So let's say if I use the paper clip to cover 3 and 4, I would be able to cover the 7 here. And then the next player after that can only move one of the paper clips. So this adds a layer of challenge. So the following player could either move from the 3 to another number or from the 4 to another number. And that gives them a little bit of, they have to think ahead a little bit to what number they might want to cover and how they could mentally add what they need to get the number they want to cover. And then every play after that, the player moves one of the paper clips. And then the first player to get 3 in a row wins. It could be 3 in a row sideways, up and down, or diagonally. And that's a nice challenge. Subtraction bingo is another popular game. You would move around the board by rolling dice or spinning a spinner. And covering the board as you go. And this is a typical bingo game where you're going to get 5 in a row across or down or diagonally. Let's see what we have next. Oh, this is another good game. This is an excellent game for place value. You could use dice, or I typically use a spinner. You have 2 markers, and you can put your starting marker wherever you want on the board. And then let's say I decide to place it here on the 24, and then I spin a 7. I can move my my marker to 2 places. There's a 7 here and 72, and there's a 27, so there's a 7 there. If I want to get the highest score possible, though, which space do you think I'm going to pick? I'm going to pick the one with the 7 because the value of 7 in that space is 70, and the value of space in the 27 is only 7. So this is helpful for reinforcing place value. You can also use it. I have an example here where you're using decimals. So if you're doing decimals, you can have your child practice adding decimals. That can be a little bit more challenging, but kids still find it fun. Matho is another popular one. Here's where you take a bingo-like card and you create the board depending on what you want to reinforce. So if you want to reinforce adding 2 or adding 3 to a number, multiplying by something, subtracting a number, whatever you roll, you would, let's say we're doing subtract 1. So if I roll a 5, I would subtract 1 from 5 mentally and then put a 4 in one of the spaces. And when we're done rolling all the and filling in all the spaces, then we'd actually play the game. So sometimes I do this on 2 different sessions. Sometimes in one session we make the board, and then on the next session we play the board. And each person has their own board, so that works well with the bingo, and they get to reinforce just one thing that they're looking at. It's a fun way to reinforce a single operation that you're kind of targeting. Strings with wings is another multisensory math technique. Here's where you take just you have a spare shoelace or something and some different colored beads. You can make patterns with some of them, like 1 color bead and then 2 colors of another bead and so forth, like I was saying before with the pattern machine. Most often this is used for reinforcing multiplication. So you can see the beads down below here. We have, what do we have there? 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is, you string all the beads on and tie a knot on both ends, and then you have your child move 1 color at a time. In this case, we'd be counting by 7s to reinforce the 7s multiplication table. Once they've had some practice moving all the beads from one side to the other and stepping through the 7s, you can then ask them various questions. So what is 7 times 3? And they can use the beads to sort of sort that out and reinforce that. This is another game for multiplication to help reinforce multiplication as an array or a rectangle or a square, if you will. You'd have some grid paper and you roll some dice, you multiply the dice, and then you fill in the rows and columns according to your multiplication. And it helps the child see that the patterns of, let's say, 6 times 2 could be 6 across and 2 down, or 2 across and 6 down. So it helps to reinforce that multiplication as an array. And whoever fills up their board first wins. So that's kind of fun to do. You can also do it on the same board and kind of end up bumping into each other, which can be kind of fun. This is another multiplication reinforcement game around the solar system. This is an amazingly popular game. I get asked for this all the time. I even have 7th graders who want to play this game for some reason. I don't know what makes it so perennial appealing, but it is. And you would take 2 dice and roll them. You could use a spinner and dice or what have you. And you multiply the 2 numbers. And then if that result is on the planet that you want to move to, then you can move to that planet and you move your way around the planets, and whoever gets to Pluto first is the winner. Another option for this is I sometimes use it if I just want to practice one of the multiplication families. So for example, if I just want to practice the 3 times table, I will roll 1 die, and then whatever that is rolled, you multiply that by 3. And that's another way to move around the board. And so that can help you reinforce just one multiplication set if you don't want to tackle the whole all the way to 12 or what have you. Chips is another good popular game. You can do this with pieces of paper. You want to have the numbers 1 through 10. This one is kind of like a little bit different because your goal is to have the smallest total possible. So you set out all these chips with the numbers on them. You roll 2 die, add that together, and that's your target number. So let's say I roll a 3 and a 4, and that's a total of 7. So I want to use any of these numbers to make 7, but my goal is to have the lowest score possible. So I probably want to start with the high numbers. So for example, 10 minus 3 would be 7. That would allow me to erase the 10 and erase the 3 or turn the chips over. And then I would continue to find addition or subtraction or multiplication or even division that results in 7. And as I do that, I can eliminate those numbers. And when I'm done and I can't think of any more operations that would equal 7, then I total up what's left and that's my score. And again, it kind of turns things on its head a little because the challenge is to have the lowest score possible, which is kind of opposite to the way the kids often learn things and reinforce things. Okay, there's a couple of 4 in a rows. These are similar to the tic-tac-toe one where you have a number strip at the bottom and you're using 2 paper clips to choose. The first player chooses 2 numbers. In this case, they could multiply. They multiply the 2 numbers, and this time they're trying to get 4 in a row. And you can use different sets of numbers. This one on the left-hand side has lower numbers and a smaller set of number strips at the bottom, and the other one has a bigger set of number strips and larger products and so forth. And you can do it with division as well. This is another very popular game, the factor game. In this game, what you do, you start out with a blank board and the first player chooses a number and then you get the factors of that number. And if you're not familiar with factors, factors are just numbers you multiply to get another number. So for example, if I choose to cover the number 6, my opponent would choose to cover the numbers 2 and 3 because 2 times 3 makes 6, for example. I included a URL here at the bottom. This is best learned and played kind of online at first because you can play against the computer at that one, but you can play a 2-player game and it will keep track of the score for you. It will also coach you as to what is or isn't a factor of a number. So if you're not that familiar with it, you can still play and learn along with your child. Another popular game is, I call this the PEMDAS game. You roll 4 dice and use any combination of adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing to try to get all the numbers from 1 through 10. So you can see I put parentheses in here to take 9 minus 8 is 1, plus 4 minus 3 is 1, so 1 plus 1 is 2, and so forth. So this can be a little challenging for some of your older kids. You can also do other numbers. If your child is old enough to learn larger numbers or negative numbers, you could do negative numbers. Or you could just challenge them to see if they can arrange the numbers to get 0 and just focus on one thing at a time. Okay. This is another really nice game for decimals when you're trying to learn decimals. You take a piece of grid paper and then you can have a spinner. I also have just a stack of pieces of paper and just write the decimals on them and then put them upside down and use 2 different colors, or you could use two different pieces of grid paper and have your child fill in the grid. This grid obviously goes to 100, right? So 100, this is 10 by 10. So they're filling in with their color or shading in with a pencil whatever the value of the decimal is worth, and the first person to fill up their card is the winner, or the person with the highest number. You know, you want to, if you don't want to play too long, spin 5 times and see who has more grid pieces filled in and so forth. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Oops, we didn't want that. Okay, we're at the end. Okay. So these are some resources for math. I mentioned Landmark. Um, Chris Wooden has done a lot of work in multisensory math. These are free math curriculum materials and videos you can watch. He's got all kinds of similar things, games and so forth. U-Cubed is another great resource. PHET Colorado has interactive simulations. There's a really good one in there called Area Builder, which will help your kid understand the area and perimeter and the differences and so forth. I have a lot of 3rd and 4th graders who really love playing around with that because it really helps them understand. They can see what's happening. The multisensory math, that's Marilyn Zecker's. She has some free resources, not too many. But that might be worth looking at. She's got a blog and other kinds of short articles that parents might find interesting to read. I'm sure everyone's familiar with Khan Academy and the free ones. And then IXL at the bottom is another really popular one. They do have a free trial, but then it's a paid subscription after that. And then I think, Beth, you have some reading.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give you control back.
Okay. Was something supposed to come up on the screen for me to get control back?
I think you have. I think it automatically gave it back to you. Yeah.
Okay, great. So resources for reading. So definitely top of the list is your child's teacher, especially if your child is on an IEP. You want to talk to your child's teacher about what phonics skills that you should be targeting, what types of words you should be targeting at home for word reading. You also want to ask your child's teacher about what grade level they're reading on to help you pick out a summer book. They can also talk to you about whether or not they know your child's Lexile level. So your child's teacher is a valuable resource. Your local librarian can help you select books. Librarians are also pretty knowledgeable about Lexile levels. Tutoring is another option. If you want to leave it to teachers doing some tutoring with your child over the summer, that's definitely a good option. University of Florida Literacy Institute, that's the website that I referenced in my presentation when I was talking about the role read and cover templates, but they have tons of free resources and materials. I highly recommend that website. All About Learning Press, that's a great website for the younger kiddos. If you're looking for activities for your earlier learners, that's a great website. Wordwall.net, that's awesome for games that you can create using words. Highly recommend that. Very engaging. I believe that's free. If not, there's definitely a free trial. Starfall, that's for phonics. There's a couple of different strands on there. You want to pick the one that's Learn to Read. Reading Rockets is a good website. That's great information for parents about reading and literacy and science of reading. ReadWorks, I use that site all the time. That's a site for fiction and nonfiction text. And that site gives you Lexile levels. I highly recommend that site. And you can search by fiction, nonfiction, and grade levels. You don't have to search by Lexile level. Flyleaf Publishing is another good resource for what we call control text. So for kids who are really working on those phonics, they have a free e-library and they break down the text by skill. So I highly recommend that. Dogo News, that's a good resource for high interest articles to read. Then when I was talking about Lexiles, I was talking about that free Lexile search. So that's the website to click on to get to that, to search by Lexile level or to put a book in and find the book's Lexile level. And then lastly, I had mentioned a wordless book that you could get if you want to work on phonics, particular phonics skills, and find words that match the phonics skills your child is working on. If you click on that, it brings you right to where you can order the book. The book is $30, and it's called Revised Teacher Wordless by Slingerland.